So you were asking earlier, it seems like it's not very simple to create an iPhone app, correct?
Well, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it as you're writing out Swift, right? And that was surprising to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Watch is worse. I'm just going to tell you that. So,
All right.
Well, the watch.
I think you can actually build a fairly useful app with storyboards only.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're going down the Swift path, not the iOS path.
Right.
Sure.
So,
Which is interesting to me. Yeah, it's not about, understood things.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to emphasize. Like, this is more about teaching how the ins and outs of Swift than it is about storyboards, which are pretty much going the way of the dodo anyways. So, we have some basics down in step 3 for our structure. And going back to our discussion about storyboards, even today, you still need a storyboard to develop a watch app. And a storyboard essentially is kind of, we had saw that zib. So here's like our zib for our post that we have created. Right? A zib is actually an older way of doing it, and it only contains one view. A storyboard, you can contain multiple views. So if we're going to build this out even more complex, like for instance, I want you, when you click on this button, to go to this new view. Like this is all, that can all be connected and intertwined into storyboards, which is great, but also is every developer team's worst nightmare when it comes to merging, when people start making changes to storyboards, because it is a black box of XML. Nobody knows how it works. So when two developers are working on a storyboard together, don't do that. It's a nightmare. That's the biggest problem with storyboards. So as far as the watch is concerned, even today in a post-Swift UI or Swift UI world, you still need storyboards for Apple Watch apps. So here we have, there's no even, like, we directly coded our UI essentially in our iOS app. Even with this watch app, we're going to need to code the, we're going to need to use storyboards to design our UI. So what we are going to build is we are going to build a menu where we can select users or posts, and probably we'll just get to users. And then if you tap users in your menu, you will then see a list of the users on our database. So the way to do this is we're going to go ahead and add a table here. You're not going to follow along on this part? What?
I'm actually going to bail. So.
Oh, man. Just when I was getting good.
I've built watch apps.
Oh, okay.
It's my Swift that's rusty.
So we have a table view, and kind of like how table view controller works, we're going to work with like a template essentially, and then manipulate it. So we have a group, and then we're going to add an image, which will be our little icon. And then we're going to add a label. There we go. We're going to play around with the size a little bit. We want a horizontal, yes. We want a little bit of insert, so I'm going to add, actually we'll do custom. We'll just do default for now. We're going to find our image size to fixed, and we're going to say 40 by 40. Let's actually make that 32. 32. We're going to want it not on the top, but in the center. This is a lot of tweaking stuff that you can play around with in Xcode. I want some spacing. Let's do that. Whatever. Okay. So we define now our template for our row. So now we need to go ahead and do what we did before, which is essentially connect a row to a class. So we're going to go we have a row here, and we already have the outlets set up. So we just need to define it to use this row controller class. Unlike in UI kit with the table view, we didn't have we don't even need to do a table view cell or any special class. It just derives off of NSObject, which is an ancient class that was used in Objective-C for every class. So back in the old days when everything was Objective-C, everything was NSObject. So
Next tab.
yeah, exactly. That's what the NS is. Next up, which is Mr. Jobs' old company. So, so all we need to do is define an object, a class, and then say that, and then define our properties. We don't even need to implement a specific view or class or anything else. So let's go back to our interface. We're going to grab our row controller, and we're going to say that we're just going to define two things. We need to define the class that it comes from, which is our row controller class. And then we need to, just like kind of we had that cell identifier, we need another one here. We're going to call it confred because that's our favorite name now. And then if you go here and go to this top right, you'll see that our outlets that we have in code are available here. So unlike before where we did control drag to create the properties are already created. So we can actually just connect them using the interface here. So we're going to drag our image to our image. We're going to drag our label to our label. And now we have access to those properties. Go ahead.
Just be clear, you don't have to play with a GUI to do that, right? You can hard code that, or you can hand code that.
You can't hand code the part that connects the property to the user interface. So there's, unless you want to go into the XML and figure it out, be my guess.
Don't want to do that.
Yeah, you have to do it through the UI.
Aha, okay.
So this,
And does all that live in
all this IB outlet stuff, you can do that in code.
Yeah.
You will run this app and it will crash because it will say those properties are not connected to anything. So you have to connect them in the storyboard or zib of your choice.
Okay.
Quick kind of related question to that. I was playing around with Xcode once, so I misconnected an outlet and
it
then
crashed?
tried to delete it and then redo it.
Yeah.
And it was very angry.
That's what you do. Yeah, you start over. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's really just nothing else to do at that point. You just start over.
Well, just delete your outlets and delete all the connection because.
Okay. I couldn't. Yeah, at the time.
Okay, I did that
Happy fun ball.
just to show. If I go back here and I go to my row controller, it says, at least it does it in this version, it says there is no property called image. It doesn't have an outlet named image because I named it that garbage.
Right.
And then it created a new outlet based on that garbage name I gave it.
Right.
So that's how you can kind of you can always go into the actual set of outlets and see what's going on in there. So now, yeah, now that should be fixed. It should give you.
Try to redo it. Sometimes what I was experiencing was saying I already had something with the same name.
Yeah, because you can do it twice, right? Yeah, and really mess things up. Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to go in here, and I'm going to kind of explain. I created a couple of protocols here for a menu item and for the data fetcher. And the way it's going to work is the menu item, it's a way to abstract drawing a row and figuring out what to do when somebody selects a row in the watch. And then the data fetcher is the one that fetches the data. So the idea being I tap on user. User has the definition of the image and the text, right? But then I also need to know, okay, if somebody taps user, this is the data I need to ask for. And so it'll then give me the list of users. So we're splitting that functionality into two separate protocols here. Here under reload is where we set up our table. So we have an IB outlet for the table, which I need to do because I did not do that. So if we go here, interface controller, let's set the table. There we go. Thank you. This is different from view controller, very different. And because You have to keep in mind, since day one, Apple's major concern is battery usage, and processor usage because it's a slow device. So everything is designed with that in mind. So here under reload, we need to grab the items and then we need to set the number of rows. So this is way different from the delegate pattern that we saw with UI view controller. We then need to go ahead and what enumerated does actually is it takes an array. So if you have an array like this, and we do enumerated, it'll actually turn that into something that more looks along the lines like this. Because I want the index along with the actual object, if that kind of makes sense. So this is a way to actually grab the index along with the item within the array. So I do dot enumerated to convert it into an index value pair. So I grab the, I call item.controller, which is on the menu item protocol that we have set up. And we then go ahead and configure that row. So in other words, we automatically, that menu item will set up the text and the image for that row. And then here is where another method that we'll implement, did select, and we tell that menu item that you're selected, and then that menu item will do whatever it wants to do. So now we just need to do the hard part of creating the actual menu items. So first thing we need to do is we need to go in here. We're going to create a new class. So I'm going to create a struct, selectable menu item. That is going to do menu item. Again, we should have problems because we're not implementing the protocols. There we go. Oh, it needs to be class. Okay. Sorry about that. There we go. I'm not going to explain why it needs to be a class, but just with some of the stuff with the watch, it needed to be a MS object class. Kit. There we go. Okay, so we need to configure the row. In this case, it could either be user or a post, because we just want a basic menu that says users post. So let's go ahead and do that. We are going to, I'm going to create an enumeration, essentially. Call it menu item type. We're going to say user, posts, and then we're going to define a property called type, and that will be the menu item type. And then here we're going to do our switch case statement based on the type. User. We have our row. We need to make sure that we need to grab the row controller. So we do that by calling the table and saying, give me the row controller at the index. And then here we're going to say row controller. Oh, we got a row controller. There we go. So right here, we're grabbing the row based on the index. We're trying to cast it as the row controller. If it's casted, now we can actually manipulate the image and the label. So our label, we're going to set the text to user. And for image, set the image name. There we go. Make sure I get the right name. User, yep. And then we're going to do the same thing for post. Change that to post. Actually, we want plural. and then post. So the image name is what the name is in the image catalog, and then the text is just a label. We don't have an initializer, so we just need to set that up. Type equals type. Questions yet? I know this is a lot, so please. We're creating a selectable menu item. It's going to either be a list of users. It's either going to be a button that says users or a button that says posts. We need to grab the row controller and then set the text or image depending on which one we're using. That should compile, but it won't show anything yet. Then we got to go in here and I got to select the watch app. There we go. Okay, so we need to go into here and we need to set up our menu items. We're going to have selectable menu item for users, right? And then we need to have another one for post. Does that make sense? And now it should draw on the screen. Cross our fingers. The watch simulator is miserable, and it sometimes doesn't work. I'm gonna skip ahead because I want you to see. I actually want you to see the result. Let's do stash, and then we're going to check out the last step, just so you can see the code. And this code actually will load the users and... Oh, you know what? I think we didn't reuse that identifier. I think that's what it was. That's probably why it didn't show anything. So here we go. Users and posts. So we have the image and the text set up. I think that's exactly what I did. I didn't use the right reuse identifier. Confred threw it all off. So here we go. Yep. Yeah, because we had a row type hard coded here. That's what I did wrong. And then when we tap a user, it loads the list of users on the watch. This is completely unusable, and I would not recommend having a table this big. Don't give me that. And then we can go back. We can go to posts. There's our ginormous list of every post. I think I have 50 posts on this thing. And then like later implementation I would do is probably when you either click on a user or a post. I had this on an earlier version, at least on the iOS app. Oh yeah, that worked. So if I click on the user, it then will load the list of posts of that user, which is really kind of cool. And then you'll probably get a hand cramp from doing this for the network. But yeah, there we go. We have a watch app. All available to you on GitHub. Please fork it, enjoy it. It should work on 10 and 11. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I'm always looking for ways to help any team out. So if you need help with your iOS app, please reach out to me. And I'm also on Twitter as well.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry it was a fire hose, but I knew it was going to be difficult when I volunteered to do this. So.